Hi, and welcome to our coffee chat today, brought to you by the Network for Financial Crime Prevention, or NFCP. Uh, my name is Louis Vargas. I'm the founder of NFCP, and we're so privileged to have Nabi Abdullaev. I know I mispronounced that. I apologize. But Nabi brings extensive experience in trade, no, not trade compliance, but in the world of, you know, sanctions, journalism, and how it relates to, Russia and and I think that's what we want to talk to him today to get his practical insights on what's going on today in Russia and just his experience on how he's transversed his different careers because from what I've seen, and he could give us more insight, but he's reinvented himself a few times now. I thought it'd be really good to introduce him to our community if you don't know of him already. And yeah, be able to connect with him if you like, and follow the things that he provides, through his channels. But before we get started, and before I hand the mic over to Nabi, I just want to say we encourage active participation. Obviously, this is a recording, so you can't do it live. But if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to us directly on LinkedIn. If you reach out to me and it's a question for Nabi, I will happily share it with him. But yes, please reach out to us. Let us know if you have any questions, concerns, suggestions, and we'll be happy to try to facilitate that at a later time. And also, just quick housekeeping, I want to point out that whatever views we express and views and opinions we express today are totally personal to ourselves. They do not reflect our employer, or we're not speaking on the behalf of our employer in any capacity. So please keep in mind this is for informational purposes only. We're not providing legal advice. If you have any specific questions related to your employer, please reach out to your internal compliance and legal teams. So with that said, Nabi, yes, if you could just introduce yourself to our community.
Many thanks for having me, Louis. I am the partner and control risks in charge of business intelligence in Russia and the former Soviet Union. Until late 2022, I was the head of control risks Moscow office, responsible for the operations in Russia and former Soviet Union republics. I joined 9 years ago, and I think that in the last 3 years, I managed to build perhaps the largest investigative team doing work related to Russia sanctions in London. And before coming to control risks, I spent 20 years as a journalist and an editor. And frankly, I think that a lot of things that I learned as a journalist were really helpful in consulting business. And happy to talk and discuss whatever issues you and your viewers are interested in. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's super great to have you. Like I said before, it's sometimes difficult to see what's real or propaganda from what's being spoken about Russia from both sides, right? So I'm not just saying it's one side that we're getting propaganda from Russia. There's also propaganda coming out of the West. So that's why I thought it's super interesting to kind of hear from your perspective, especially since you've seen it from many angles. So yeah, thanks again for being with us. And I guess to get things kicked off, you know, as I mentioned, you've reinvented yourself a few times. So I see that you started out in construction engineering, if that's right.
No, that's not right.
That's not right.
I graduated in construction engineering, but
Okay.
I haven't worked a single day
Okay,
as
so
a
you're
construction
educated.
engineer.
There
Yeah,
you go.
but it was a very interesting experience because, in construction engineering, they teach you to understand how things work with each other. Yeah, a lot of mechanics, a lot of physics, a lot of technical things, and a lot of drawing. When I was studying, it was early 90s. There were no computers so easily available. So you had to draw big sheets of papers, yeah, with kind of tiny details. And this was a really interesting experience because it kind of disciplines you. To pass an exam in humanitarian field, you just need to be well spoken and kind of think quickly. Yeah, in a technical discipline, you need to do some real physical work, and it was really helpful. Yeah.
It's interesting you say that because like in my career, I've done a lot of things before accidentally landing in compliance and fin crime
Yeah.
and sanctions. But like my degree is in social science and history. But to your point, having a history background, it helps with
It
sanctions.
helps a lot.
Also, having the analytical mind and stuff like that. So
I
I draw comparisons to your analogy
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. We are talking about different things. You're talking about talent. I'm talking about character. Yeah. And I'm of the
Uh,
opinion that character beats talent. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
I hear
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
I
mhm,
haven't worked a single day. When I graduated, it was 1995. When I started studying, it was still Soviet Union, and then it was New Russia. Everything was in disarray. The
wow.
economy was in shambles, and I was thinking what to do. And even at kind of school, I was pretty good in writing, and I started writing for a local newspaper, and it worked pretty well.
Mm,
At that time, you know, uh, I just came with my first article, and the chief editor offered me a job. It was a newspaper in Dagestan, in a southern republic in Caucasus in Russia.
mm,
And the salary he offered me, as I remember now, was $400, which was 4 times larger than my mom's salary. And she was a doctor at that time. And first
wow.
of all, it was a nice salary. And second, it was, journalism is a really interesting profession because it has very quick reward,
Mm,
instant gratification, if we say
right.
scientifically. Yeah. You do something, next day your name is kind of tens of thousands of people see it. Yeah, they comment it, and it
Hmm.
kind of feeds into your ego. So, and another thing that journalism was really helpful in kind of bringing me up is it gives you access to conversations that you will not be able ever to access if you are not a journalist. I was a
Mm,
political journalist.
hmm.
Being like in my 20s, I was attending different political events or different discussions in the Dagestani parliament, Dagestani government, and kind of learned, observed people in actions, observed how decisions are being made, how organizations work. And you're not just observing it, you're documenting it. And that's why you kind of build certain institutional memory within yourself.
Hmm.
So it was a really helpful time. And then the second Chechen war started. And as I said, I was writing not so badly and I was speaking English. And when before the second Chechen war started, this whole area was plagued by kidnappings. And
Mm,
several international aid workers and journalists were kidnapped. And
mm,
so a lot of journalists from around the world, from the international agencies and newspapers, were reluctant to travel to Chechnya, to Dagestan at that time.
right.
And I was very conveniently sitting inside, knowing what to do, speaking English. So I started stringing from there for Associated Press, for BBC, for many other
Mm,
international publications. And then eventually, 2 years later, the Moscow Times, Moscow-based independent English language newspaper, offered me a reporter job. So in 2001, I moved from Dagestan to Moscow,
mhm,
and I learned quickly. I learned from, I wouldn't say from the best, but from the very good editors there, because, three alarms from the Moscow Times received Pulitzer Prizes eventually
mm,
after they moved out.
mhm,
But they got trained to write in the Moscow Times. So there was a really good school. Uh, I quickly became a lead reporter on security and political topics already on the federal level.
right.
Putin was already in power at the time. Yeah. And then I won a stipend and went to Harvard to study public administration then. I spent 1 year studying there, got my diploma, and I returned back to Moscow on the 31st of August of 2004. And I was thinking, now it's a good time. Russia was on the rise, a lot of investment, a lot of business activity. And on the next day, I don't know whether your viewers remember, Beslan happened. This was a terrorist attack on a school in the Caucasus where 1,300 people were held hostages for several days, including 1,000 children. And then there was a kind of Russian military attack on this school. Hundreds of people died. And I was called back by the Moscow Times saying, listen, you are expert in the region. You studied terrorism, negotiation at Harvard. Can you cover this? I said, okay, fine. And then I spent another 7 years in the Moscow Times. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, actually growing up to a deputy chief editor. And then in 2011, Russian state news agency RIA Novosti had an ambition to set up something like mini BBC World Service.
Right.
They had this translation department that would just translate Russian language news and post it in different websites. They invited several kind of trained international journalists to do this job, and eventually I ended up being the head of this unit that was called Foreign Language News Service at RIA Novosti. And there were 160 people there, divided into 11 desks. And they were speaking and writing in 11 different languages. And they were producing 2 newspapers, one in English, one in Arabic. And I speak only English of all of these languages. And it was a really interesting and, in the meantime, horrifying experience because I frankly didn't know what these people were doing.
Right.
And, in an Arabic desk, for example, I had a Syrian activists who were anti-Assad, and the Russian position, like official position, was pro-Assad.
Right.
And these guys, like, without my knowledge, will write an op-ed, something like, and they were poetic op-eds, like maybe Arabic style, saying the black wind of changes is moving hairs on the head of death-bringing dictator of Syria or something. And this is a Russian official newspaper. And then I would, a Syrian ambassador in Moscow would read this kind of stuff, complain to the foreign ministry, and foreign ministry will summon me and ask me, what's going on? What are you doing? Yeah, this was an interesting time. Yeah, where in the meantime, I got access, kind of observed a lot of people, like from the presidential administration, from the government. RIA Novosti at that time was the largest and the most influential news agency in Russia. And I was kind of close to its leadership. And it ended up badly 3 years later, just before Putin's first war in Ukraine, before Crimea. They understood what is going on. I think they made already the decisions. And RIA Novosti was kind of liberal-minded media at that time. I was allowed to do anything what I wanted, and we did a lot of interesting stuff at RIA Novosti. And then they turned it into, they merged it into Russia Today. And the outfit that I was running these days is called Sputnik, which is a Russian propaganda kind of machine at this moment. The day became Sputnik, I walked out. I walked out 5 days later. The Moscow Times invited me as the chief editor, and I spent another 1.5 years in the media managing the newspaper that actually I loved and still love a lot. Yeah. And at a certain moment, it was owned by an international company, the Finnish company Sanoma Independent Magazines. They sold it to a Russian investor. because Putin introduced a ban for international companies, for foreign companies, to own more than 25% in any media. So they had to sell it off. They sold it off. And then I understood that things are going down with the Russian media. It was 2015, and I decided to. I achieved what I wanted. I became the chief editor. It's a really nice position to be. Yeah, because
Right.
everyone knows you. You know everyone. Yeah, you get a lot of cool stories. Like you talk to a lot of smart, interesting people. You manage smart, interesting people who you can handpick on the market. Yeah, this is the best thing actually that could happen to a journalist, to be the chief editor of a newspaper. And at a certain moment, I understood things will not go well. I resigned and spent 1 year doing really nothing. I started teaching after several months, and I was invited to teach at the Russian, at that time, most prestigious private university that was involved in public administration studies, and they invited me as a senior lecturer. And I spent several months teaching, which ended up in several years. And then I saw an ad on LinkedIn of control risks looking for a position of analyst in their Moscow office. And I had no idea what does it mean. But I never heard about control risks at that time. I was kind of in my 40s already. Yeah. But then I typed, I just checked LinkedIn and found out that there is one person, former Moscow Times reporter, who was a senior partner at Control Risk. His name is Charles Hacker. He wrote a beautiful book about Russia. It's called The Arc of the Russian Business. In Russia, wait a second, give me a second to remember his name, the name of the book. Zero Sum. Yeah, it's a really good book. And I reached out to him and said, Chuck, dear Charles, at that time, yeah, I'm a former chief editor of the Moscow Times and kind of looking for a job in control risks. And what would you recommend? He said, go ahead, please. Yeah. So I applied. I passed through the exams, and they eventually took me as not as an analyst, but as an associate director, because they thought that for the analyst, I will be badly overqualified. Yeah. 3 years later, I became a partner and the head of the Moscow office. It doubled in its staff under my management and maybe tripled in its operations. And then the war started, and we understood that it will be quite difficult to continue operating in Russia as an international company, which was described in the Russian media sometimes as a British private intelligence agency. Every time I read this while I was in Moscow, blood will curdle in my veins. Yeah. So we decided, and the company decided to close the office in Moscow and move the team outside Russia. That's what we did. And as we moved the team outside Russia, we had to reinvent ourselves once again, because what we did before in Russia was usual due diligence. And now all the requests that were coming were related to sanctions. And we were learning on the fly to things like what's control test, how to do it, what kind of questions you need to include. And eventually, we became quite good at it, that a lot of companies, especially law firms who actually worked with us, started recommending us everywhere to their clients. And our practice grew by a factor of 3 in the first year after we left Russia. And it's still very robust, very kind of, we have a small team but it's, as you say, lean and mean. Here we did 700 sanctions-related investigations and cases in 3.5 years for over 200 clients, which actually gives me reason to believe that we are managing one of the largest sanctions-related practice if we speak about investigations and risk consulting. Sorry, maybe it was a little long, but kind of gives you the trajectory. Yeah.
No, that was great. I really appreciate that. Yeah, and that's what I mean. I was curious about kind of, how your career took its turns and how it led you to London. So you've kind of given us that background. So I really appreciate that. And you also spoke to again how you had to learn new skills that you didn't have before. So like you said, reinvent yourself to say, okay, we've done this in the past and we could still do that, but now how we could, transform and do some different things to make our practice a bit better. So was really interesting to hear.
Yeah. That's actually what I like in my work now these days, especially being the head of Russia business intelligence at Control Risks, is that clients do not come to you with monotonous works. And sometimes you need to invent new scopes because these days, one size does not fit all. Every company, well, a lot of companies are facing the same challenges, but a lot of them also face unique challenges.
Right.
For example, I like how we treat it, if you allow me, kind of one example of creative thinking and using imagination on how to approach a task. We have clients who come to us and ask, when the war started, we stopped working with our Russian partners. And speaking about Russian partners, these are major Russian energy infrastructure companies, as you understand, run by Putin's friends.
Right.
So we stopped working with them. We withdrew from Russia. Of course, these Russian companies, they sued them for breach of contracts and kind of lost value. And quite conveniently, shortly before the war, Russia adopted so-called Lugovoy law, which allows a Russian company to move arbitration disputes onto the Russian soil, independent of what is written in a contract with international company, on the basis that Russian companies will not get fair treatment in the courts of unfriendly countries. So they take all these cases into the Russian courts, they win them, they seize the assets of the ex-partners, international companies. They also seize the guarantees provided by international banks for these projects. But very often the award that was given by Russian court is so much bigger than the amount of seized stuff, or like money. So that the companies are afraid that these Russian companies, I mean international companies, our clients, are afraid that companies like Gazprom, Rosatom, kind of big Russian state corporations or private corporations with a lot of state contracts, they take the award claims outside Russia into Russia-friendly countries like Turkey or China or the former Soviet Union countries like Kazakhstan, and will try to collect or seize the assets of our clients on outside Russia, based on the Lugovoy law award. So they come to us and say, can you help us? So we brought this, we divided this task into three elements. First is decision-making of a company in Russia, say Gazprom. And we need to understand who makes these decisions. Is it chief legal guy or someone else? Is this guy influenced by presidential administration? Is there any pressure from Putin? Go and collect the money. How high is this issue on his or her agenda? How pressing is? Sometimes we are talking hundreds of millions of dollars. But in the meantime, what's organizational logic? Because if it is still unawarded, it can be regarded as an asset on your balance sheet. if you take it, say, to Turkey, and then you lose, or the Turkey awards you half or like a fraction of what you want, then you will have to report losses. And also, you can create a precedent, because once this happens, and there are quite a few such claims kind of waiting their turn, it will be much easier for international courts or like foreign courts, even in Russia-friendly countries, to throw away these claims, saying there was a precedent already. No one wants to set up a precedent. So first of all, you look at the organization. Then you look at the potential trace of the document. Okay, fine. They send this claim. Where will it end? If it goes to the justice ministry in a Russia-friendly country, or to an individual judge, like lands on his table, or elsewhere, and once it's there, what's the procedure? If we say, I don't know, Turkey, will the judge make the decision based on just what he had received from, say, Gazprom? Or will he reach out to the presidential administration or a justice ministry or somewhere else and check out what's the political situation? So we look at decision making on this side. And then once we understand the decision making on the side is such that it's a political matter, it's not just a legal matter, we look at cost-benefit analysis of the political leadership in this country, whether they will be happy to sour relations with a major European company and maybe European government behind this company in order to make Gazprom a little happier than it is happy now. And in most cases, like in all cases, is no. So just how you wrap your mind around this task, how you break it into different executable routines is something that excites me in consulting the companies in such
Right.
situation. Yeah.
And that's definitely an interesting way of looking at it. Because I think, sometimes we try to, look at the problem at hand and just try to attack it straight on. But, if you have that understanding of what happens around, that could inform you better instead of just rushing in, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And also maybe kind of helping you with your next question. Russian companies are not very much eager to go and sue and collect the money from their ex-partners, because there is still hope that the war will be over eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And if not business as usual, there will be some business together. And better to have these claims as levers
Mm-hmm.
for future negotiations than spend it and then sour relations completely and kind of ruin your reputation and make
Right.
yourself unacceptable partner in future.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, they're playing the long-term game, which is
Yeah, exactly.
sometimes some companies don't think about that, right? They think about the short-term gains, like, fine, we're going to sue them and we're going to make our money back or whatever money we make. But the long game, it's like, okay, whenever this war is finally over, we get back to business and we don't have to now worry about, making new ties to different industries or jurisdictions because they're already there. We just pick up where we left off.
Yeah. Louis, but
Yeah.
as you understand, you do not necessarily need to collect the award.
Mhm.
You need sometimes to win it and know where assets are located. So contra risk does a lot of asset tracing work, and it does not necessarily always win with taking over of these assets. It's just another lever in negotiations that a company had during disputes. Yeah.
Interesting. And I guess now to dig a little deeper on the sanction side. So, with the current, I guess, sanctions regime that we see today, like how has your work evolved to help clients navigate this? I mean, you already mentioned some of that, how you're looking at assets, at different assets and thinking about, how, they might need to navigate through exposure to Russian markets. But do you have any other insights you could share as far as maybe maybe not so much assets, but like maybe figuring out or maybe making a risk-based approach on dealing with certain oligarchs or stuff like that?
Yeah, sure. Assets is actually quite recent and rather small part of our work. And recent, why? Because it is for the disputes to mature to the moment when you need to, it takes years.
Right.
Yeah. So from the very start, we started doing ownership and control tests of the Russian parties. It started initially in the exit context, kind of international company pulls out of Russia, sells its assets there. They need to make sure that the assets will not end up in the hands of the sanctioned party. So in the meantime, for years before the war, Russian oligarchs, especially sanctioned ones, were working hard to put layers of nominees between them and the companies that are owned or controlled by them. And on the other side, just after the war began, the Russian central bank and the Russian government issued directives allowing companies with high sanctions risks to remove information about its ownership and it's about its directorships from the public record. You can go on to the website of the largest Russian banks. You will not find the names of the CEO there. It's who are sitting on the board. It's really bizarre. Yeah. But then how can you understand whom you are dealing with, at least from the compliance point of view? You need to demonstrate that you put effort in kind of identifying the owners and the controllers of the companies you are dealing with, or at least whom you are selling to you, whom you are selling your assets. So what we do, we use our network of on-the-ground sources and ask questions like, who appoints top managers in this company? Who controls financial flows? Who uses the company's assets as its own, their own, like limousines, private jets somehow, sometimes? Who makes decisions on mergers and acquisitions? Who is being paid dividends? So there is a list of questions that we developed together with our law firms with whom we partner in such things. And they allow us to understand control, or sometimes when we need to kind of reconstruct the directorship scheme, we take the latest snapshot from the website using a kind of archive or web archive things like pre-war. And then we talk to sources and ask questions. Who is in, who is out? And you kind of build on something. It's not perfect, but it works. It's much better than nothing, or than using the old information, which is already 3.5 years old. Yeah. This is perhaps the largest part of the sanctions work that we do. We call it sanctions risk exposure analysis. We also look at the company and its principals and owners' behavior. Like, do they do business in occupied territories? Do they work with the Russian military? Are they close to Putin or any political decision making? Do they do business with sanctioned companies? Additional set of questions. This is like a bread and butter of my team. But, about 1 year after the war started and sanctions started getting out, we started getting requests for investigating product diversion. It took some time for the companies to realize that they are seriously exposed if so-called high priority list items, sometimes including like handheld instruments, optical devices, industrial tires, precision tools. This stuff is still being sold in Russia. So they come to us and ask to investigate how their products are getting leaked into Russia. First of all, to patch these leakages. And second, sometimes there is already information that is out in the public. They need to make self-disclosure together with the law firms, together with the council. and they need to bring to self-disclosure the evidence that they did their best to investigate it and actually address the issue. So it's again a source work on the ground where we talk to people, and it's very interesting that even despite the war and sanctions and censorship, people are eagerly sharing, because sanctions evasion, product diversion these days in Russia is a very popular business, which is tacitly, sometimes not so tacitly, stimulated by the government, who say, okay, fine, bring stuff here. And people are just roaming Russian market, asking, like, this is a military plant. Are they in need of a certain things? Or what kind of things do they need? I will travel to Turkey, Kazakhstan, Dubai, or elsewhere and bring it. So that's how it works. And everyone shares who is doing what. Because after some time, there is already certain specialization. These guys are bringing this kind of things, that guys are bringing that kind of things. And if you do things for a long time, like investigations, like my team, you already know that certain preferred routes for this kind of things are going through Kazakhstan. This stuff goes through Georgia. Yeah. And as you do it, your institutional knowledge grows, but also the network of sources on the ground grows, because it's becoming more established. Yeah.
That's so interesting because,
Yeah.
in my small world in the financial industry, there's sometimes we could recognize, that there are, certain circumvention routes. But then sometimes it could just be where, we don't have the knowledge like your team would have to say, like,
Yeah.
okay, certain commodities generally go through this direction
Yeah.
or in that direction. And for us, where we sit, it's like, well, we have to boil the ocean because we don't know where it's going, where it's coming from. We think are these countries, but we're not sure. So it's really tough. So I could see why your um, service is so needed, because you could really help people pinpoint where to look for certain things instead of running around like
Yeah,
a chicken
exactly.
without a head.
It's a nightmare, you know. We talk to people, to compliance officers in our client companies, and they just openly say that their capacity, it's not necessarily experience or knowledge, but just physical capacity. I'm kind of a middle-aged professional, and I have three guys in their 20s, and I am responsible for the global trade compliance. And we are doing business in 100 countries. How can I trace it? Yeah,
Right.
yeah. People get frustrated, but in the meantime, I say people learn. And increasingly, as I talk to industry representatives, corporates, bankers are really good. Yeah, usually, mainly because bankers are more seriously exposed to regulators. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they have money actually to hire professionals. Yeah, it's getting better. The bigger problem is not so much with the companies, it's kind of the whole design and implementation of sanctions and turning them into a political knee-jerk response to whatever Russia is doing.
Right.
Yeah. If you
Yeah.
take like the EU example, they're working on the 19th
Mm.
package of sanctions. And would there be a need to work on the 19th package of sanctions if the first five packages would have been implemented properly? Yeah.
Right.
And enforced
Hmm.
kind of properly? Because at a certain moment, it becomes, I would say a joke, but imagine a situation of kind of signaling game with Putin. How many warnings do I need to give a person like him so that he changes his behavior? 19th warning? 29? Yeah.
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 No, it's true. I mean, I think that's been the complaint since the beginning. It's like, we're not striking at the heart of what could really um, drive the
Matter.
change that we're
Exactly.
trying to. And it's maybe because of, I mean, there's many factors, right? It could be because the EU still relies on a lot of the oil coming out of Russia. It could be that there's so much intertwined business that they don't want to then, make it more difficult for them. So it's like, okay, let's start turning off the spigot slowly so that they feel the pinch, we feel it too, but we could then diversify what we're doing. But I think to your point, it's a
But
lot
in the
of warning
meantime, we
shots.
understand we need to not forget that there is a war going on
Right,
and people are
exactly.
dying. Yeah, while we are, uh, as I
Yeah.
said, kind of life is what's happening when you are making plans. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess from your perspective, I mean, now talking about the war and how sanctions is not really effective at ending the war.
Yeah.
I guess from your point of view, giving your specialization in negotiation and conflict resolution, what do you think is crucial in, eventually bringing a resolution to the conflict? I know it's a tough one.
Thing is, it's a no, it's both tough and easy
Mhm,
because both sides still have maximalist
mhm.
positions. No one wants to yield anything. Both countries still have resources to continue fighting.
Right.
And what could have been done by the West, for example, in order to deliver on the policy goals of sanctions? There are two policy goals. The first one was let's change Putin's behavior. And it became very quickly that it doesn't work.
All
So
right.
it was replaced quite quickly. You can find it, it was written in all fact documents, in the statements, kind of why are we doing this? Changing Putin's behavior was very quickly thrown away because it became clear it doesn't work. Now let's undermine Russian economy in the longer term so that Russia will not be an immediate threat to the US and its allies. And the second thing, to undermine Russian war machine in Ukraine. We don't see really serious impact on the second, on the war machine, because you may remember, like, the onset of the war, there was reporting that Russia has missiles for another 3 months, or they
Mhm.
will be running out of this in another 6 months. We are 3.5 years into this, and there is no shortage of material.
Right.
Yeah, and also there is a saying that not a single war stopped because someone ran out of bullets. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. But in the meantime, saying that sanctions do not work completely would be wrong. Russian commodity sales, especially oil sales and gas sales, have declined, meaning Putin has less available funds to invest into other things but the war. So the war remains a priority. One third of the Russian budget is eventually going into the war machine. But they have to save on other budget allocations like social things, stuff, infrastructure. But it's not collapsing. And one should not underestimate Russia's tolerance to Russians, tolerance of the Russians to kind of economic hardships and kind of general deterioration of life. Those who lived through the 90s, yeah, for them this is nothing. Yeah, what's going on? I mean,
Right.
the things are going down. Yeah, there is a strong inflation there in Russia. Not very many people are happy with things like they cannot make video calls on WhatsApp now. And for many people, it was quite an essential thing. You know, grandmothers calling their grandchildren,
Right.
people like talking, doing business, or talking like you and me now. Yeah, that's increasingly difficult in Russia, but
Wow.
still tolerable. Yeah.
And I guess, and maybe throwing a bit of a curveball because I've always been interested in this. It's like, Russia, from what we've heard and from what Putin has said, he wants to kind of bring back the former USSR countries back into the fold, either as officially part of Russia or as a close ally.
Yeah.
Um, and, you know, from my small angle in the financial industry, I always think about, okay, we should think about our exposure to the former Soviet countries to know if something does happen, how do we pivot our operations that might be there, or businesses, how do they pivot their the businesses that are there, because it might happen like with Russia and Ukraine where you have to start taking things offline. um, how do you see it? Do you see it that like it's a full sum game where this is his angle and he's going to achieve that objective one way or another? Or do you think that's just Western propaganda to kind of scare people into a second kind of Soviet Union?
I don't think that he wants to recreate Soviet Union as such, because he would have started with someone smaller than Ukraine, and he was happy with the degree of integration with countries like Kazakhstan, Armenia, Kyrgyzstan, this joint customs union. Ukraine is a separate story because Ukraine is so closely historically intertwined with Russia, and it's a Slavic country with the very close language, with the very tightly knit history, especially post-Soviet history when it was part of the same country, or even pre-Soviet when it was part of the Russian Empire. And the people share a lot of same cultural traits. And the fact that Ukraine was becoming increasingly westernized was a challenge to Putin, because it would be an example of a Slavic Orthodox country being capable becoming a European country. Ukraine is a difficult country from many points of view, even before the war, like the state of governance, high level of corruption, but it was quite robust uh, country with kind of people's democracy. People could go out, they could change presidents, and they did this several times. Yeah, and this is something that Putin would not accept. He always maintains that Russia is a separate civilization, that its identity is formed as anti-West, as kind of a balance toward the West, to the West. And then suddenly, the very same, not very same, but very close nation becomes integrated, meaning Russia cannot be integrated at a certain moment, meaning Putinism, the system that he built itself, is not the ideal system for the people of the culture that he claims to be completely unique and anti-Western at its core. Thing is, Putin's Russia is capable of aggression against other countries. But in the meantime, if we speak, for example, Baltic countries, they're being often named as next potential targets. 3.5 years, Putin has not yet seized even 1/4 of the Ukrainian territory. So if we look at the balance of military and economic powers on both sides, it's not in Russia's favor, and he understands this. And so provocations like what happened in Poland 2 days ago, they may be happening in future. But the thing is, with all these countries in Eastern Europe, it's not an ideological thing where you can either you or me and let me throw a nuclear bomb on you. It's tactical thing. It's about seizing this piece of land, or so-called Suwalki corridor into Kaliningrad. So you need to think in a on the ground level, which requires military actions on the ground, military involvement. And this is not something that Russia can afford and will not be able to afford for a long time until it is tied up in Ukraine. Yeah.
And
In the meantime, you of course, corporates and banks and companies need to think about hybrid attacks, cyber sabotage, smear campaigns. This is cheap and sometimes very effective. Yeah, this should not be dismissed.
interesting. Um, so I guess if you had a crystal ball, I don't know if you want to make such a prediction, but how do you see it ending? And I guess the reason why I asked this is because I remember right before the invasion of Ukraine happened, and people thought that I was crazy, suggesting that we should look at, Russian nexus, any, potential that there is a war that breaks out. We should understand our exposure. They're like, it will never happen. He will never do something like that. But then it does happen. So I'm just curious, since we're not really playing by any handbook, I'm just curious, do you have an idea of maybe how this plays out in the near or long term?
This one is difficult. Yeah. Because there are so many changing factors. For example, US support of Ukraine. Yeah, now it's kind of seriously diminished. Whether it will be back in full force after this administration goes away and there is a new administration in the US, whether Ukraine will be able to sustain fighting in this situation. And on the Russian side, the Russian economy is cooling off. There are a lot of complaints from production sector. A lot of companies and plants are experiencing problems with sales or with their supply chain. A lot of companies are working 2-3 days just because they cannot sell their products. Economy is going down. And in the meantime, it's also the state of the minds of the Putin's elite. Whether they will be willing to tolerate these kind of things, or whether they might want to strike a deal with the West behind Putin's back. And another thing, whether the West is ready to propose such a deal. So far, there is no such a deal, and these people just their cost-benefit analysis is just either I die from some chai or tea laced with Novichok, or I continue doing my job. Yeah, and being part of the machine built by Putin for political and business reasons, and the main reason being the war. So it's difficult. My thinking is that the situation will change only with Putin's departure from political arena. It may happen because of age, health, or because at a certain moment he will understand that he might understand that the majority of the population and the elites are not happy with continuation. That's very interesting because there is a Russian most famous pollster called Levada, and their recent poll said that majority of Russians are against the war, and majority of Russians, same Russians, want Russia's victory in Ukraine. Yeah.
How does that work?
Let's win quickly. Yeah, maybe like this. Yeah, and
They give a time
like
frame.
that sentiment is generally yeah, we shouldn't have started this war. It was a wrong deal. But once we started, we cannot lose. We need to win. Yeah.
Man, it's such a complex
It's a complex.
situation.
It is. It is. It is. And we are getting a lot of requests from companies. Not we were getting a lot of requests when Trump came to power. Now this number is going down. When can we return to Russia? Yeah. What will be the conditions? And the thing is, even if all sanctions are lifted by the US, we don't know whether the EU and UK will follow the suit. Most likely not. But in the meantime, there will be pressure from the European business because they say our American competitors are thriving. But also, in these 3.5 years, Russia built a lot of barriers for normal functioning of international businesses in Russia. Like companies from the unfriendly countries are not allowed to invest into Russian land or Russian enterprises. So JVs will know. So this whole thing, or even like simple things. Now a cop can come to you and say, "Show me your search history." Is it something that, say, Western CEO or kind of managers will be willing, tolerating in Russia? Maybe, I don't know, but so there is a whole body of operational hurdles that companies will face as they return, including things like whatever niches that they left open are already occupied either by Russians or by Chinese companies. And for example, these days, a lot of companies built by international automakers, German, Japanese, are working on are producing Chinese cars. Yeah. And what will happen if a European company comes back and says, please remove Chinese and give me back my property? Putin said this will not happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Man, so we've had a really interesting conversation, and we could keep going longer, but I don't want to keep you. We could definitely schedule a follow-up, but there's two more questions I wanted to ask you before we end this session. Is after everything we discussed so far today about your past, about geopolitical situations, do you feel, from your perspective, is there something that you want to share that we haven't covered yet? Anything that you feel like is very topical that you would advise people to be on top of?
Maybe not something that people need to start thinking about, because I'm doing sanctions, and from the sanctions point of view, people speak about divergence of sanctions regimes, saying Americans are now looking into Latin America, European and UK sanctions regimes are directed towards Russia.
Right.
And this is only one divergence. But if you look into the map of sanctions enforcement in Europe, it's led by Finland with over 1,000 criminal cases for sanctions violations. Then Poland, Lithuania, Netherlands. I live in UK. Do you have any idea how many prosecutions took place here on Russian sanctions since the start of the war?
I would say maybe less than a handful, if that.
13.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
More than I thought, 13.
And the thing is also, this was the case for quite a few other European countries until recently, like Germany. And suddenly, several months ago, Germany ramped up this enforcement. So this is one thing. Another thing is that there is a very strong breach between the declared policy goals and sanctions implementation and sanctions design. If the policy goal is to undermine Russian economy, sanctions should go after Russian oil trade and gas trade and commodity trades. Instead, it goes against things like spare parts for cars, Chanel perfumes, Birkin bags, which is crazy. I mean, by selling a Birkin bag to a Russian, I don't know, oligarch's wife or whatever, how do you undermine Russian economy?
Right.
Or how do you support, help Ukrainians to fight this war? So this should be rethought. So what I want to say, there are so many levels of divergence, not just US and EU, which requires completely different level of awareness from business. You need to start thinking several levels and start talking to others, to companies like ours, for example, who are doing a lot of sanctions work and understand that risks can come up from different sides and from different levels and different kind of risks. So that's both scary and fascinating, and this is something that people need to be aware.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Super interesting. I agree. And yeah, definitely a different way to approach things and look at it, especially as the US, as you say, they have their attentions elsewhere, but the rest of the EU is now starting to pick up steam and pick up where the US has left off, maybe.
Yeah. But the fact is, you know what I want to say,
yeah,
they're picking up steam at different speed
hmm
and in different directions, and they're sending different signals
exactly.
by
Right.
picking up. Yeah. And so if you have operation in different countries, you need to monitor what are they doing and kind of be most accurately aware that Finnish authorities, for example, or Polish authorities are super keen to go after sanctions evaders, while people in Portugal, for example, they are on a more relaxed side. Yeah.
Yeah, Southern Europeans, it fits the
Yeah.
mold, right? The stereotype. But I'm glad you pointed out to the Finnish authorities because that's something for me sitting in the Nordics. I also see that the Nordics competent authorities usually follow each other, right? When one side picks up on something, they share it and it kind of makes its rounds. But for sure, the Finnish authorities have been leading the way on the sanctions front with Russia. And who knows, maybe it's because they share a border with Russia, maybe because of their long-standing history. But for sure, they're the ones that seem to be taking it the most seriously and very active.
Fully
Yeah.
agree with you. Yeah. For them, it's an existential threat, and they treat it as such. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And last question I have for you, maybe on a lighter note. You know, for young professionals that are interested in business intelligence, risk analysis, geopolitical environments, you know, what skills and experiences would you recommend that they develop to kind of get into this field?
That's interesting. You're asking because I wrote a LinkedIn post that was kind of most popular post that I ever wrote on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Ah, we got to reshare
Yeah,
that then with this.
yeah. And what I mentioned there is the ability to quickly pick information, to learn. This is kind of a technical skill. We have different speed with which we learn, but you need to be a quick learner. Second thing, you mentioned history from the very beginning of our conversation as a useful asset, kind of mental asset or intellectual asset. I fully agree because as Thucydides said, the events of future will repeat the events of past until men are men. So people repeat the same things. Yeah. And
Right.
if you can draw lessons from history, they will be very helpful for future. Yeah. And the third thing, one needs regional expertise.
Mm.
So that's why journalists are doing quite well in consulting business because they're quick learners, not necessarily always good historians, but they have better regional expertise than most other people. Yeah.
Great points to share. And yeah, when we upload this recording, I'll try to find a link to that post so we could include it for our viewers.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, that's it. You're off the hot seat for now until maybe
Thank
next
you.
time. But I want to
Thank you.
thank you so much again for being open and being willing to share with us. I thought it was super interesting, and I'm really
My
hopeful the
pleasure.
community does as well. And hopefully we could schedule something again in the future.
My pleasure. Yeah, anytime. Yeah, it was nice meeting you, and it will be good
Yeah,
to meet your community, at
yeah.
least mutually.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I might be in London in October. So if I am,
Please
I'll
let me
give you a
know.
call.
Please let me know. I have a kind of a big travel agenda for October.
Okay.
I'm going to Georgia, I'll be
Oh
in
wow.
Italy, I'll be in Spain, but
Mm,
in
yeah.
between my trips, yeah, if
Mhm.
we could catch up, I'd be happy to.
That'd be
Okay.
great. So yeah, again, like I said at the outset of this call, anyone who has any questions, comments, please reach out to us on LinkedIn. If you're not a member yet, go to nfcp.info. You could become a member there and also get an insight into what we're doing, what we're all about. If you don't follow us on LinkedIn, same thing, follow us there and you'll see all of our content and what we're trying to achieve for you, the community. So with that note, thanks again, Nabi. It was very great, session with you, and can't wait to talk to you again.
My pleasure. Have a good
Have a
day.
great day. Take care. Bye bye.